From hidden access to humbling reckoning, the story of a software developer whose arrogance in creating backdoors nearly destroyed his life and the financial security of thousands. As a software developer, how often do you leave a backdoor in your code? I used to do it on every major project, until just 3 months ago, when my entire life completely fell apart because of a simple line of code buried deep within a banking application. Now, I'm not sure if I'm the villain of the story or just another victim of my own hubris. Most people think hidden access points are only for hackers or government spies. But the truth is, ordinary developers like me implement them constantly. Sometimes for convenience, other times for ease of debugging, or simply out of laziness to follow established protocols. It's an open secret in the industry, something no one talks about at conferences. I didn't start out intending to become a security risk. I was just a kid from a small town in Ohio lucky enough to get a full scholarship to Carnegie Mellon to study computer science. I was the first in my family to go to college. My parents were so proud they mortgaged their house a second time just to help me with living expenses in Pittsburgh. I promised them their sacrifice would be worth it. Graduation came with a mountain of anxiety. I had student loans to pay, parents to make proud, and absolutely no idea if I was good enough to survive in the real world. When FinSecure offered me a position, I accepted immediately. Although the salary was lower than my peers, it represented stability, and that's what I needed. My first few months were a blur of orientation sessions, security training, and small bug-fixing assignments. I was eager to prove my worth, spending entire nights, devouring documentation on weekends, doing the impossible to fit in. A senior developer named Jake took me under his wing. He was a man in his 40s with 3 kids and a perpetually exhausted look, but he knew the systems better than anyone. When the mobile banking project came up, Jake recommended me for the team. It was my first real chance to prove my capability. I dedicated every waking hour to that project, pouring all my energy into perfecting it. Then, 2 weeks before launch, during a routine security review, I found it, a critical authentication vulnerability in the login sequence. It would take days to fix properly. We'd have to rebuild the entire authentication flow, and there was no way to get that done before the deadline. The client had already committed their users to the launch date with a big marketing campaign. They weren't going to accept any delays. I panicked, but I didn't tell anyone. I looked for shortcuts, ways to patch it without rebuilding the system. Nothing worked, and the days passed relentlessly. Jake kept asking for status updates, and I kept saying everything was fine, while silently dying of fear. It was during one of those nights, staring at my monitor at 2 a.m., when the idea came to me, a maintenance portal, a hidden entry point that would allow me to bypass normal authentication if I needed to quickly fix something after launch. It wasn't elegant, but it would buy me time to correct the authentication problem in the next update without delaying the launch. I added the code, buried it deep where code reviews wouldn't detect it, and justified to myself that it was a temporary solution, a stopgap that I would remove in a few weeks once I fixed the real problem. Launch day arrived. We had some minor issues, but nothing related to the vulnerability I had found. The client was happy, my team was happy, and I was promoted to senior developer with a nice bonus. I used half to pay off my student loans and sent the other half to my parents. They called me crying, saying how proud they were. My intention was to remove the backdoor, it truly was. But other projects came up, the mobile app ran smoothly, so there it stayed, and it stayed, and it stayed, until I almost completely forgot about it. About 6 months after launch, there was a problem with transaction processing in the app. The usual debugging tools weren't helping, and the client was getting impatient. That's when I remembered my hidden access. I went in, fixed the problem in minutes, and got out. No one ever knew I had bypassed all security protocols, and I felt like a genius. That became my signature, my personal trick. At every job, I would leave myself an entry. I rationalized it as an emergency preparedness measure. But the truth is, I love that feeling of power, that secret control over systems others couldn't access. It made me feel important, special, superior to my colleagues in a way I couldn't quite express. I switched companies several times, always to bigger and better positions, with more responsibility. And each time, I carried my habit with me, leaving small, hidden entry points in the code, my personal insurance policies that allowed me to fix problems faster than anyone else, which only cemented my reputation as a miracle worker. After 5 years in the industry, I landed at Meridian Financial. It was a huge step up in prestige and salary. They managed over $25 billion in assets for high-net-worth clients and had security protocols that made my previous employers seem like they were running Windows 95 with the password. The interview process was intense. 6 rounds, including a full background check and a 4-hour technical assessment. I passed everything with flying colors and was assigned to the wealth management platform team. My new boss, Derek, was the CTO, a former Google engineer with piercing eyes that seemed to read your soul. At Meridian, they truly cared about security. Code reviews were rigorous, penetration tests aggressive, audit logs exhaustive. But old habits die hard. In my first month, I added my standard backdoor, hidden where even their exhaustive reviews wouldn't find it. The first time I used it, I felt that familiar rush of adrenaline, the sense of outsmarting the system, but also a new emotion, a stinging remorse for betraying the trust of a company that took security seriously. I ignored that feeling, telling myself it was just a tool helping me do my job better. For almost a year, everything was fine. I used my hidden access sparingly, only when absolutely necessary to fix problems that would have taken days through normal channels. I was careful, always covering my tracks, always making it seem like I had followed proper procedures. I was rising quickly at Meridian, becoming a favorite of both Derek and the CEO, a man named Michael who had built the company from scratch. I was given more responsibility, bigger projects, larger bonuses, and I started to believe I deserved it all, that I was just that good. Then came the night that shattered everything. It was a Thursday. I remember because I had gone out for drinks with some colleagues, celebrating the end of a major project launch. I got home around midnight, got into bed somewhat lightheaded, and was about to fall asleep when my phone started going crazy with notifications. Text messages, calls, emails, all at once. I grabbed my phone, squinting to see the emergency alerts from Meridian security systems. My stomach churned as I read the notifications. Unauthorized access detected, multiple security layers bypassed, client data compromised. I drove to the office, still in the clothes I had worn to the bar, my mind racing through the possibilities, none of them good. When I pulled into the parking lot at 2 a.m., there were already dozens of cars there, including the CEO's Tesla and several vehicles I didn't recognize. The elevator ride to our floor was the longest of my life. I was rehearsing explanations, defenses, excuses, but deep down, I knew exactly what had happened. The conference room looked like a wartime operations center. Executives in crumpled suits, security personnel with multiple laptops open, stunned IT staff, and two people in the corner with the unmistakable bearing of federal agents. Michael, the CEO, was red-faced, shouting into his phone, while Derek stood at the head of the table, his face grim. Everyone looked up when I entered. Derek gestured for me to join him at the main computer, where he had code on the screen. It was my code, my backdoor, the meticulously designed maintenance portal I had built months ago. "We've been compromised," Derek said, his voice strangely calm. "Someone found a way into our systems through this code. Do you recognize it?" The room fell silent. Everyone watched, waiting for my answer. I stared at the screen, praying for some other explanation, some way for this not to be what it looked like, but there was no mistake. It was my code, my hidden access. "Yes," I said. "It's mine." The room erupted. Everyone was talking at once. Michael slammed down his phone and walked over, his face contorted with rage. "You did this," he spat. "You put this in our system." I tried to explain that it wasn't for malicious purposes, just for maintenance. But my words sounded hollow even to me. Derek raised a hand, silencing the room. "I need details, Alex. All of them. When did you add this? What exactly does it do? Who could have known about it?" One of the federal agents stepped forward. A woman in her 40s with piercing eyes that missed nothing. "I'm Special Agent Lel, from the G's Financial Crimes Task Force," she said. "Before you answer those questions, you should know that over $43 million has been transferred from client accounts in the last 3 hours, and we've traced the access point directly to this backdoor." I felt the ground tilt beneath my feet. $43 million. This wasn't just a security breach. This was theft on a massive scale. Derek's face had gone pale. "How did this happen?" he asked. "How did someone find this backdoor?" I shook my head. "I don't know. I've been careful." But Agent Lel interjected. "Have you implemented similar backdoors in other systems?" The question hit me like a punch. Suddenly, the magnitude of what I had done crashed down on me. All the systems, all the companies, all potentially vulnerable because of me. "Yes," I admitted, "at every job I've had for the last 5 years." A collective gasp went through the room. Derek briefly closed his eyes, as if in physical pain. "You need to list them all," Agent Lel said. "Every company, every system, every backdoor right now." The next few hours were a blur of confessions, explanations, system diagrams. I wrote down every company, every system, every backdoor I could remember, watching as they mobilized a task force, making calls to the security teams of other financial institutions. Some of my former employers had already transitioned to new systems, but most were still running code that contained my hidden entries. By dawn, they had confirmed that 3 other institutions had been breached, though not as severely as Meridian. At some point, Agent Lel pulled me aside. "You're not arrested yet," she said, "but don't leave town. We'll need to formally interview you." Derek personally escorted me out of the building, taking my badge, my laptop, and my access cards. "You understand your employment has been terminated effective immediately," he said. "And I'll be recommending to the board that criminal charges be pursued." I went to my empty apartment, collapsed on the couch, and waited for the inevitable news about the breach, the arrest that would surely follow, the end of my career, my freedom, my future. I checked news sites constantly, but strangely, there was nothing. 3 days passed, an anxious silence, before my phone rang. An unknown number. "We need to meet," the voice said. It was Derek. I barely recognized him. He sounded exhausted. He gave me an address, a coffee shop far from Meridian's offices, and told me to come alone. I considered not going, considered fleeing, but where would I go? Instead, I showered, shaved, and went to face whatever came. Derek was sitting in the back corner of the coffee shop. 2 laptops open, a stack of papers beside him, a cold cup of coffee in front of him. He looked like he hadn't slept since I last saw him. I slid into the seat across from him, expecting accusations, threats. "First, the good news," he said. "We've managed to contain the immediate breach at Meridian and have recovered about 60% of the stolen funds." I felt a small wave of relief. "The bad news is we've identified another 14 systems with your backdoors, including 2 major banks and a stock trading platform." My stomach clenched. 3 of those systems have already been compromised, though not as severely as ours, Derek continued. "Clearly, someone found one of your backdoors and realized you'd use similar code elsewhere. I wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor, to be anywhere but sitting across from this man whose trust one had betrayed." "Why?" Derek asked, finally showing true emotion. "Why would you risk so much?" I tried to explain how it started as a shortcut, became a habit, and then almost an addiction. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When I finished, he shook his head. "You're not understanding. I don't care about your psychological motivations. I want to know why, technically, you chose such an obvious implementation." I was confused. Derek had been a developer before he became an executive. He knew code, but he wasn't a security specialist. "What do you mean, obvious?" I asked. He turned one of the laptops toward me, showing my Meridian code side by side with snippets from 2 other systems I had worked on. "See here and here." He pointed to similar patterns, the same basic structure, the identical weaknesses. "You use variations of the same technique everywhere you went. It's like you left a signature." The realization hit me. Suddenly, all my backdoors followed more or less the same pattern because I had gotten lazy, reusing the same tricks with minor modifications. Any decent developer who found one could easily find the others. I felt sick. Derek closed the laptop. "This isn't just about you anymore, or even Meridian. We're looking at a potential financial crisis if all these systems are simultaneously targeted." He pushed a folder across to me. Inside was a contract. "What is this?" I asked. "The federal agencies want to prosecute you," he said. "They're building a case as we speak, but I've proposed an alternative." He explained that a task force had been formed with representatives from all affected companies. They needed someone who knew exactly where all the vulnerabilities were, who could help close them quickly and quietly before anyone else discovered them. That someone was me. The contract was for a consulting position, working under strict supervision to identify and remove every backdoor I had created, and then help strengthen the overall security of each system. "It's that or prosecution," Derek said bluntly. "And I'm pushing hard for this option, despite significant opposition. So don't make me regret it." I signed immediately. For the next 2 months, I worked alongside the security teams of each affected company, under the watchful eye of federal agents, identifying and removing every vulnerability I had created. It was grueling, humbling work, facing the people whose systems I had compromised, seeing their expressions shift from anger to reluctant cooperation. The worst was returning to Finn Secure, my first employer. Jake was still there, now the head of security. His face when he saw me walk in with the task force was something I'll never forget. A mixture of disbelief, disappointment, and rage. "You," he said, "were the one who compromised our system?" I nodded, unable to meet his gaze. He shook his head. "I vouched for you. I got you that first big project. I told everyone you were going to be exceptional." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry." He laughed bitterly. "Sorry. That doesn't begin to cover it. The bank lost millions because of your backdoor. They almost went under. 3 branch managers were fired. The CEO resigned. You destroyed lives, Alex." There was nothing I could say to that, because he was right. As we worked together over the next few days, Jake's anger didn't subside. But it became more professional, more focused on fixing the problem. He asked me once why I had done it. I was scared, I told him. I found that authentication vulnerability 2 weeks before launch, and didn't know how to fix it properly in time. He stared at me for a long moment. "You could have told me," he said. "We would have worked it out together. We would have gone to the client if necessary, extended the deadline. That's what teams are for." The devastating realization that I had caused all this damage out of simple fear of admitting I needed help was overwhelming. At the end of the 2 months, we had identified and closed every vulnerability I could recall creating, plus a few I had forgotten about. But the most disturbing discovery was that 3 of my backdoors showed evidence of having been accessed by someone other than me. Whoever had attacked Meridian had also found others, and we still didn't know who they were. The final task force meeting was held in the same conference room where it had all begun. Representatives from each affected company sat around the table, along with the federal agents who had been monitoring our work. Agent Lel stood up to address the room. Thanks to the cooperation of all parties, we have successfully closed all known vulnerabilities without further breaches, she said. Based on our investigation, the attacks appear to have been carried out by a group operating out of Eastern Europe. While we are still working to confirm, she looked directly at me. As for the question of prosecution, based on the full cooperation provided and the extensive remediation work, we are not recommending criminal charges at this time. I exhaled for the first time in months. There were conditions, of course, a substantial fine, several years of supervised work, restrictions on the types of systems I could access, but I wasn't going to prison. After everyone left, Derek asked me to stay. Do you know what the worst part of all this is? He said. I shook my head. We went through the logs of every system that was compromised, including ours. Do you know what we found? He continued. None of the backdoors you created were necessary. Not a single one. Every problem you fixed through them could have been addressed through proper channels. Yes, it would have taken more time, required more paperwork, involved more people, but the systems were designed that way for a reason. He was right, and that truth hit me harder than anything else. I had convinced myself I needed those shortcuts, that I was special somehow, above the security protocols everyone else followed. He stood up to leave. One last thing, he said. Next week, I'm launching a security audit of every system at Meridian, and I want you there. Me? I asked, confused. You're keeping me? He almost smiled. I'm not stupid enough to fire the only person who knows exactly how developers think when they're trying to game the system. That was 2 months ago. Now, I spend my days looking for backdoors instead of creating them, looking for the same patterns, the same shortcuts, the same arrogance I once had. It's humbling work, necessary work. Yesterday, I found my first one. A junior developer had created a similar maintenance portal, hidden deep within a new credit processing system. I called him into a conference room, showed him what I'd found, and watched his face go through the same emotions I had felt that night in Meridian's conference room: fear, defensiveness, rationalization. I didn't lecture him, I didn't threaten him. Instead, I showed him Meridian's logs, the damage that had been done, the lives that had been affected. I told him my story. In the end, he was the one who suggested removing his backdoor completely. I still wake up sometimes in cold sweats, thinking about all the systems still running with hidden doors created by other developers, just like I used to be. I know we can't find them all. I know there will always be people looking for shortcuts, but at least now I'm on the right side of that battle. It cost me almost losing everything, but I finally understand something that should have been obvious all along. No convenience is worth the cost of compromising security, especially when it's not just your security on the line, but the financial well-being of thousands of people who trusted their money to the systems you built. I haven't spoken to my parents since this happened. I can't bring myself to tell them what I did, how close I came to going to prison. Sometimes, I start to dial their number, but I hang up before it connects. What would I tell them? Hey, Mom and Dad, remember how proud you were of me? Well, it turns out I'm actually a terrible developer who put millions of people at risk. My colleagues at Meridian still don't trust me. Most don't even make eye contact with me in the hallway. I don't blame them. I wouldn't trust me either. Derek is the only one who treats me normally, and I think it's only because he sees me as a useful tool, not a person worthy of redemption. Agent Lel contacts me every month, reviewing my work, asking about any new vulnerabilities I've discovered. Our conversations are strictly professional, but sometimes I catch her looking at me with curiosity, as if she's trying to decide if I'm genuinely reformed or just playing another card. The junior developer whose backdoor I found sometimes stops by my desk with questions about security best practices. I think he sees me as a cautionary tale, what not to become. Although, if we're honest, I think most developers are one bad decision away from becoming me. It's so easy to justify shortcuts when you're under pressure, when deadlines loom, when you think you know better than the system. I'm no longer allowed to work on production code. Just review and audit, which means my actual coding skills are getting rusty. Sometimes I miss it, the creative process of building something from scratch. But maybe it's for the best. Maybe I can't be trusted with that power anymore. The money is the worst part. 40% of what was stolen from Meridian, over $17 million, is still missing. That money belonged to real people, families, businesses, charities. I think about that number every day. It's tattooed on my conscience, a constant reminder of the real-world cost of my arrogance. I've started volunteering at a coding camp, teaching security principles to new developers, trying to instill better habits from the beginning. Maybe it's a form of penance, or maybe it's just my way of trying to balance the scales, but it feels important, necessary. Even one of my students asked me last week, as a software developer, how often do you leave a backdoor in your code? I looked at her bright, eager face, so much like my own years ago, and gave her the same answer I now give everyone. Never again, I said. Never again. So, am I the jerk for creating backdoors in every system I worked on, even when that led to massive financial theft? Or am I the victim of an industry that pressures developers to take shortcuts and prioritize speed over security? The truth is, I'm probably both, the villain of the story and someone who got caught in a system that rewards the wrong things. I'm trying to make it right now. That's all I can do. My career will never recover. My reputation is shattered. My future is uncertain. But at least I'm not making it worse. At least I'm no longer creating vulnerabilities that put people at risk. Sometimes, when I'm reviewing code, I still feel the urge to add my special touch, my signature. But then I remember that night at Meridian, the expressions on everyone's faces, the damage I caused, and the urge disappears. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that the shortcuts that make your life easier can make someone else's life much, much harder. And no convenience is worth that cost. Not for me. Not for anyone.